Hello and welcome to the Baseball Wisconsin podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gotzler. All right, so today's episode takes us into extra innings, takes us to northern Wisconsin with one of our very own Joe Waite. Okay, now when you talk about fuzz and what Joe Waite does for the association, I don't even know where you start. Okay, I mean, he's going to talk a lot about his journey, his coaching, his time in the classroom, but on the association level, executive board, being, all the history of the association, and probably what he spends the majority of his time in, and it's more than a full-time job, is the yearbook. And if you've been fortunate enough as a coach to listen to this, or a family, or maybe even a player that was on it, what a treasure. And that yearbook is so special. We print more and more every year. The evolution of it has just been incredible. So Joe's going to talk about the history of that book and how it works, the state of baseball, in the state of Wisconsin, and just a great time to think about, as the, Easter has turned and we're getting to the second half of April here in 2025, and conference play is up and rolling in high school, and hopefully the weather starts to turn across the state. You start making your way towards to May and into June. Great time to just think about the association and, kind of the founding fathers of those things and some of those Mount Rushmore guys, and you got to put Joe on there. So anyways, without further ado, Joe Waite. Hey, Coach, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks, Tim.
Absolutely. Well, hey, for the listeners, just give us a background, where you're from, where'd you grow up, what's your playing journey, your coaching journey?
Grew up in Bruce, Wisconsin. It's a little town on Highway 8 up north here. And my parents were real young when I was born, and my brother was just a year and a half after me. But they got me into baseball. I just remember being like 4 years old and hitting balls when my dad came home from work. And then he was my little league coach. Mom kept the book. And they really kind of instilled my love for it. And then even as a kid, we were playing Stratomatic baseball. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's like a card game, use dice. So we draft our own teams. And of the six guys that did that league when I was probably fifth through eighth graders, five of the six of us went on to be baseball coaches. So that was pretty cool. And then I had a Babe Ruth coach, Greg McCunda, who was a football player at UW-Eau Claire, but he just got fired up about coaching, and he was reading books, and he wanted to coach, and we ended up playing. I think we were 32-9 when I was 15, from this tiny little town where we had 11 kids on the team and a girl playing right field, and he got us in all these tournaments and stuff, and just really played a lot of baseball. And then I was all conference in high school, but it's all relative. It's one of the smaller conferences in the state. And I went to school at UW-Eau Claire. I was going to major in journalism and then try playing baseball, but my shoulder was already barking at me. And I probably wasn't talented enough to make it there anyway. But I did play 18 years with the Weyerhaeuser Black Hens, which is a town ball team. And that was some of the best years of my life. Playing with my best friends, and we played twice, 2 games every weekend, and that it was a big deal back then. Town ball up here. That's before people had other forms of entertainment. So the town I played in was population 275, and we probably had 100, 200 people watching our games. So it was a great experience, and I played third base there, and I'd like some of my ashes to be sprinkled on that old dirt infield, skin infield at some point. But then graduated, I ended up switching majors to elementary ed. I realized I love kids. I started working some sports camps in Eau Claire called NYSP, National Youth Sports Program. And it's kind of funny, Andy Neese, our president right now, when I first met him, he's like, yeah, we met. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, I don't remember. He goes, yeah, I was 10, and you were the softball instructor at this camp. So I just loved sports and kids. And in elementary ed back then, if you were a teacher, you were also going to be a coach, which I was fine with. So I got my first teaching job on my 22nd birthday at Owen Withee. I was sixth grade, assistant football, assistant basketball, and head baseball. And head baseball there for 3 years and head basketball for 2 years. And looking back on that, I want to apologize to those kids for all the stupid things I did because I was fired up, but I had no base of knowledge. And then after 3 years, I hooked up with Cumberland, and I learned more from Mark Fuller in 10 minutes than I probably did in the 3 years that I've been trying that myself. And so I assisted Fulls in football and baseball for 23 years. I had basketball in there. I was doing eighth grade basketball for quite a few years, and went down to middle school football for quite a few years. There's one year I had 5 extracurriculars, 2 kids in school, and I was writing Baseball Wisconsin at the same time. And so people ask me how can I do this, and I'm like, I don't know how I did that, because now I'm retired, and I wasn't going to sub. I was just going to work on the book, and it still is such a dash to get it done. The day before it was due, I worked 27 hours in a row on it. I nodded off for 10 minutes in the middle of the night, but other than that, I didn't leave my computer for 27 hours straight. And that was making my mom's edits. She's 80, but she still is my editor in chief, and which is kind of cool because it keeps us close. And her hobby, and I caught a break here. Her hobby is correcting magazine articles. So she has a passion for books and writing and the language, and that I got that from her. I got the love of the game from my dad, and it's yeah, it seems like it just started. Now I'm 60, and 33rd consecutive book, Baseball Wisconsin, just sold out yesterday, which is great. I mean, it just absolutely flew this year. So that means it's picking up popularity and people are finding out about it. And that's been a great way for me to be involved at the state level in the game, and not just the local level, and really feel like I have friends all over the state. And I have some of my best friends are in baseball, and I might only get to see them 2 3 times a year, like the board members. But it's every time we get together, it's like we see each other every day, never miss a beat. And that's a pretty well-oiled machine at this point, the WBCA.
Well, appreciate you going into some background. And before we get to the book and the association, and I do want to spend a lot of time there, I'm just going back, and as you're telling these stories about your youth and playing 18 years in town ball, it reminds me of this past offseason, I read a book called Chasing Influence, and it was a fictitious story about a coach in Minnesota and a town ball team and people coming back and the field is being named after them. And honestly, like, again, I'm a history teacher. I know that you have history background, obviously, as well. I think about like Ken Burns' baseball series. And I know anybody who's probably listened to this has probably seen it or a couple episodes. And I just can't get enough. Like, history, baseball, America's pastime, and you talk about that. I have like this fictitious view in my head of like what baseball used to be and how pure it once was. And you made a great point about like, but before people had all these other distractions and things to do, it was a great place to come together. So when you think about that time period in your life and what that meant to you, I think it talks a lot about relationships. So maybe start there. Like, what has the game done for you personally?
You know, to me, as I got older, it almost became, I don't want to say mystical, but I finally was mature enough where, like, I would get to the park, and as we got older, the older guys on the team, we'd have to get there a lot earlier to stretch. And we'd play catch probably for 5 or 6 throws because we didn't want to ruin the throws for the game because their arms were all shot. But I would just stretch, and there were cows and cornfields all around, and it was such a, I mean, it was such a beautiful place to be in that place in that time. One of my greatest things was this stand in line at a restaurant. And this guy comes up and he goes, "Are you Fuzzy Wade?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You're the greatest third baseman I've ever seen." And this is Weyerhaeuser. I'm laughing, but yeah, still I felt really good about that. That was pretty cool. But that's how big of a deal it was then. And and the Hens, we call ourselves the Hens. Still close to them. Two have died, and that ripped our hearts out. That was like losing brothers, and I'm still close with those guys, and that was our common bond. That's what it was. It was the glue that kept us together.
Well, as you get older in the game, you get around more people, you get involved with the association. So maybe start talking about the early days of the WBCA. How did you break in? What did it look like then, and just a little bit of the evolution of our state association.
Yeah, well, I didn't have much of a choice because I was Mark Fuller's assistant coach, and right the first year we went to San Francisco to the national, and I was really amazed that it was such a big deal because when I was at Owen, I got the letters to go to the state clinic, and they didn't have any money, and I didn't have any money, so I never even thought about going. But then, to get involved and jump head first into this, and I think the third year I was kind of tagging along. Foles had this idea that he got from a coach from Viterbo, I believe. It's like, you guys should do a book like they do with football. And I was really big. Everybody thought I was an expert in computers. Well, at the time, what can you do with a computer? You can write an email, maybe. Well, you couldn't even write an email because it was pre-internet. But I could print my lesson plans, and everybody was just like, "Ooh, I'm the expert." And I thought, yeah, because I was too dumb to know really what this would get evolved as or evolve as. And so Foles was pretty active with me the first, I don't know, dozen years or so that we did it. And then he just got more active, like at a higher level with UWW and his travels abroad and stuff. But I kept the thing going, and I had some really great help. Chris Levold is was a head coach at Boston. He was coach JV last year, and then Mark Weber is a retired head coach at Howard's Grove, who just are exceptional guys, and through this they've become very good friends. Scott Nye, who is at Tomahawk now, he's teaching down at Sauk Prairie, trying to find a coaching gig down there. Whoever gets him is going to be very fortunate. He helped out a lot with the book, and then Johnny Matera at Kenosha Tremper helping organize photos and stuff, things that made it possible for me to make it as big as it is. Because if I didn't have those guys, I couldn't do what I do and really kind of put this giant floating puzzle all together in a very tight deadline. And so the WBCA, I've seen it grown. I think in 1990 there was probably 240 members, and now we're I think approaching 650 already. We had 520 some at the clinic, and the clinic is great. We've had speakers from all over the country that come in, and they're just amazed that little Wisconsin is so good and nationally as good as anybody. There's very few associations that pull more people in for the clinic than we do. I was talking to Jerry Weinstein, and he said in California they don't even really have an association. So the baseball guys there like they don't like sharing their secrets, and I'm like, that's just so wrong, because part of the beauty of this profession is making friends with other coaches. You and I, for example, I got to meet you, and you live 5 hours south of me, and it's still, you reach out and we communicate a lot because what you're doing, what I'm doing, and baseball's been that thread again. That's really been a great part of my life. And I'm a baseball guy, and I don't know. There's probably no better way to put it than just to say I'm a baseball guy, because then everybody knows that this fraternity of guys like us that are just happy to see each other and talk to each other about the game and grow the game. And I think Wisconsin's really special that way. And a lot of that's to do with our executive board, Fulls, with what he does with the clinic. But we've had some really good elected presidents. Scott Stouty did a really good job on Burlington, and now he handed the reins over to Andy Neese at Regis, and Andy will be exceptional as well.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, I think about the tie that binds, right? Like you said, that thread that connects everyone through the game, and there's no better compliment than just being a baseball guy. And again, that will tell you all you need to know. You can vouch for someone; he's a baseball guy, and you want that so much for your players. No matter what
Yeah,
community you're in, you want that brotherhood. You want that for your players, and they don't even know what it means quite yet. So when you lay that out, it's just so well put. So there's your journalism background right there. Um, One of the cool things I think is, like you said, you're 5 hours north. You're in a remote area. but because of the work you do with our association, you're able to connect the state. A lot of things funnel through you because of the book. So what are some things you've learned over the years, the people you've been around, different parts of the state, different coaches, Division I through Division IV? We've seen a lot of changes over the years: spring ball, summer ball, the mesh of both. So as I bring those things up, what comes to mind?
Um, I think the main thing, and one of my goals, is always to really get the D4s to be involved, because I coached at a D4. I coached at Prairie Farm for 4 years. I played at a D4, and it's important to those kids in those towns. Baseball's important, and they're not. Honestly, most of them could never play for you. Um, but they're good. It's all relatives. That's why we have the divisions. If there was one division in baseball, there'd never be a D4 in the finals. It just wouldn't happen. But we have the four, and so those kids get a chance to play it. Up to get to Appleton. And so one of the things I really try to do is get the D4s, and that is the hardest thing to do, because you have so much turnover. They're fighting just to grow their programs or have a program at all. And my greatest frustration with the book by far is hammering at coaches to do their surveys, get their kids represented. And D4s, if we strike out, that's mostly where it is. They just don't do it in a lot of cases. And I I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe they think that, hey, nobody really cares about us, so why should I take the time? But I'm telling them I do care about them. I coach. A coach from Florence just got inducted in the Hall of Fame. I got a brain cramp. Coach Lapointe, he thanked me during a speech for recognizing there's baseball actually exists north of Highway 63, and that was really nice of him to say that. But that's something I've tried to do. I try to get Superior to Kenosha, and I think that's what makes the book great, is that we have better representation, I bet, than anybody does, just because I I keep hammering away to get every single survey that I possibly can. And I think we got 425 and probably 20 or less that we didn't get. So that's pretty good batting average.
I'd say so. And one thing that I want to ask you on, because you see it on your desktop for countless amounts of hours. Have you seen an increase in turnover? I know you mentioned, when you first got started, it was a no brainer. You're teaching, you're coaching multiple sports. This is just what you do. And, like from your lens, what are some of the trends you're seeing with coaching? Is there more turnover? Why are guys leaving? Jobs going unfilled? Programs are, in different spots, communities are enrollments declining. So just from your lens, what are you seeing as some of the coaching trends?
I try to keep track of the demographics, and the average experience that a head coach had 3 years ago was, I think, 9.5 years or something like that. And now that's down to like 6.8. We have 62 coaches that are either rookies or in their first year as a head coach at their schools. There's definitely a lot more turnover. And I think the pressure of coaching now is so much harder because of parents. And really, I think if anything's changed, I don't know if the kids have changed as much, but the parents have. The parents really are focused on their kid and don't really see the team per se. I mean, I ran a survey one time in Baseball, Wisconsin, maybe about 4 years ago, and I asked this question to coaches. I said, would your parents in general be happier if their kids started on a team that won 4 games? Or would they be happier if their kid was a bench player, role player on a team that won 25 games? And 90% of the guys said they'd be happier if they were a starter on a 4-win team. That's sad. And, if parents would just realize, just let your kids grow up and be men. It's one of the things that they're trying to live through their sons in some cases, and it's just they're not doing their sons any favors. And then that's I think why we're going through coaches so fast. There was more veteran coaches getting out this year than I've ever seen, by far. It's every year there's maybe 4 or 5. This year, I think I listed 14, 15, including myself. and it's just the environment's just is changed. And really, I mean, I don't know if the travel ball, kids are going now and they're investing all this money and all this time. If parents think that that gives them the right that their kids should be special, their kid's going to play college. Well, no, not necessarily. What your kid should do is have a great educational experience, playing baseball with his friends, gets to wear his town's name across his chest. And that's what it's about. And it's that's what I've seen in the last few years. There's just more pressure on coaches, and coming from parents, but just in general, and the time commitment and stuff like that. And then you get teachers who don't want to do it because they're hearing all the bad stories, but they don't see the good parts about coaching. And these kids that I consider sons that I've had as players, that they will always be my sons, and they're missing out on that if they don't give this profession a shot. But it's a lot of work too.
I think I'm glad you went there because the negatives, and those are real. Those are real in every community. And as soon as you think you got it figured out, be ready because I feel like you're always one parent group, one administrator from a good experience not going so well. And but I often think we forget about the good parts. There's a reason why guys keep coming back. There's a reason why they get so much fulfillment. And I've talked to coaches before, and I'm sure I've had these thoughts myself. It's like I don't know my life without the game, without coaching, and a little bit of a fear of what it's going to be like when you're away from the game. And so maybe let's go there. Like, what are some of the best things it's given you? What are some of the positives if you were to make a pitch to a young coach to stay in it or to get involved, if it's the association or to hop on a staff or a freshman assistant coach up to a varsity coach? Like, what stories not being told about the beauty of coaching?
Yeah, I get a chance to talk to a lot of coaches in small schools, and I tell them to stay with it. They're and I share my experiences my first 3 years where I was they want to run at me out of town, and I was just mad about it. And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, okay, I kind of see what you're talking about. And get mentors, get somebody that you can talk to. So there's a lot of guys that'll talk to me about things, and I love doing that. And I think that if you can stay in the profession and you build relationships with certain kids, with all your kids, but certain kids you're going to stay close with for the rest of our lives. And then the other thing too is this fraternity we have as fellow coaches that I I get sick to my stomach thinking about the day that I quit doing what I do for the association, because now that's my connection to the game. And I just, like I said, I see my best friends all the time. When we get together 3 times a year. But on the board, we're doing some pretty cool things, and so we had an email thread going around today. We're gonna do this video board, which will in essence be like our Hall of Fame display at the Timber Rattler Stadium in Grand Chute. And so we're gonna have a great big video board with our Hall of Fame on it eventually, and all kinds of information about the association, and it's going to be a really cool addition, I think, for the association celebrating coaches. One of the things I'm disappointed in, we all are a little bit, is when we have the Hall of Fame banquet, a lot of guys leave because, especially the northern guys, and I get it. You've been listening to speakers, and it's noon, and it's a chance to get out of town and get home, fairly early. But like listening to the 6 speeches of the Hall of Famers this year, and all their stories had this common thread about the relationships they've had with opposing coaches, assistant coaches, the relationships they had with the kids, and all these things that if they would stick around and just hear those stories, that's the gold in coaching. And they all said that as they got older, it wasn't the wins that counted so much, but it was the journey, of making this family environment that you try to mold, from taking individuals and trying to get them to be selfless and become a team. And it doesn't always work, and it can be frustrating, but when it does, it's incredible. I heard a speaker one time, and I can't remember who it was. He said, "But we're as coaches," he goes, "we're addicted to the highs and the lows." Because most of society, they just kind of cruise through their days. But he goes, "We're addicted to the highs of winning, close game, a walk-off single or something like that. But then we're also addicted to getting beat that way because we're just ticked off and we want to get back the next day as fast as we can." And there was a lot of sense in that. So I think all coaches that are good are a little bit of adrenaline junkies to some extent. And, when I put the book together, who's good because of how they just talk about their team and what they're doing with them. And you look at the standings and it's like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I get every survey from teams that you have winning records. A lot of times I don't get these teams that have been a struggle because I don't know if the commitment's there. Yeah, but some guys struggle and they keep filling out the survey and they keep trying and I give them the most credit. That's hard.
You mentioned so many things. Like I think the one I really want to touch on to start was the mentorship. And you and I laughed before we recorded. I was 24 years old, just fresh out of college, and got a head job, and I thought we were going to win the state championship, and I was the smartest guy in the room. And you were 22, getting started. First 3 years was a dumpster fire, and everybody's angry, and you're angry, and like, man, if it wasn't for some mentors for me, people in my circle, I don't know what I would do. And now that I'm becoming a little more of a veteran coach myself, and I have this platform trying to connect people to other people, because man, I see myself and so many other coaches. They're living that life. Maybe they're 10 years ahead of me, or maybe they're 5 years behind me, and then maybe they got babies at home, or they got teenagers at home, or whatever. Like, I think that mentorship piece builds that fraternity and builds those connections that are just guys that are living the same life. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Absolutely. Matt Vold, he's moved to Arizona. He was the head coach of St. Croix Falls. We got to be very good friends, and that kid would call me all the time. And he was in my conference, and I'm like, damn it, I'm giving you all my stuff. But he was so passionate about coaching and wanting to get better, and he calls so many guys. And he's in Arizona now. He's on a fast track to coaching at a high level someday. There are young coaches that when they call me, I'm like, I wish I would have figured that out when I was their age, and I'm happy to help them however I can because I want to grow the game. Um, I wanted to grow at my own school, obviously, but like the last 3 years I was at Cumberland, we ran a middle school camp, but we did it with Barron and Cameron and St. Croix Falls, and and then we had Spooner kids there. So we had the whole half the conference middle schoolers. We're working with each other's kids. I see this Cameron catcher as an eighth grader, and I thought, oh man, this kid's going to be a stud. And yeah, here I am helping him out, and that's before I knew I wouldn't be coaching Cumberland. But that's just what you do. You're a baseball guy. That's what you do. You try to grow the game and you work with kids.
Well, and the game is, always growing. You talk about the growth of the association and the coaches and the players, and I feel like that sometimes I feel like the talent pool is just continuing to ascend, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But like as you talk about the state of the game of baseball in Wisconsin, from the amateur level to the professional level, and if it's Jerry Weinstein or others that talk about just how fortunate we are in the state of Wisconsin, this little cold pocket of the country. So when I bring it up to you, like, what do the state of baseball in Wisconsin? How would you describe it?
I think it's as strong as it's ever been. When I first started doing the book, I think we had maybe 3 or 4 kids a year that were going and playing D1 college ball, and now it's over 100. And a lot of it's to do with the academies. They have a chance to play all in the winter, and and then the northern schools seem like we're always chasing the southern schools. But there's academies popping up in the north now too. So kids who want to, they can play through the winter. And everybody still encourages their kids to be 3-sport athletes. I played 3 sports, football, basketball. Um, now I'm a old man golfer. I hit it straight and short, but I love sports, and I think we all agree that for most kids, their high school playing days are as good as it gets. A few of them, and you're going to have a lot more than like we would have up here, obviously, but a few of them are going to go on and play at very high levels. But yeah, like how many kids are playing in the pros now that come from Wisconsin. And Kellenick, a good example. But he didn't even play high school ball. He played for the academies, but he had his future mapped out, and he was a god among men as far as baseball players go. But there's a lot more kids like that than there used to be, and I think the high school coaches have gotten better. The clinics, like I said, tripled on the clinic attendance. Guys have more access to coaching videos and things like that. And I think more guys are more willing to talk to each other about what works and what doesn't work. So I think all those things are contributing factors to how good baseball is right now in
Yeah,
the,
I,
in
I
the
would, I
state.
would, I was just thinking about like, I mean, if you're into coaching right now, and there's no more gate. The gate's not closing information. There was a time not so long ago when you had to really go and seek it out. You had to have a few connections, and you had to travel. But you just mentioned you can access videos and articles and clinics and social media, and yeah. I mean, I think it was Coach Vodenlich said it this year at the clinic. We used to have to go and seek information as coaches, and now you have to just sort information, and that's a whole different skill. And I thought that really resonated with me, as someone who's at shows like this or other podcasts I listen to, where I'm always looking for something else and something else. And but information's out there. It's just, guys, are they willing to do it and apply it to their programs? And how do they work with that young athlete, like you mentioned before? The high school kid, for the most part, hasn't changed much. Yeah, the distractions have changed, the expectations have changed, but they have academies, they have club, they have all these things that are helping them develop more and more and more. But the other thing you mentioned that I want to like lean in on is you've had the connections in this. You're part of the state, northern Wisconsin. You have a friend in every town in the baseball world. Like, what are you picking up from the best coaches in the state of Wisconsin at the collegiate level, the high school level, professional level? Because you're connected to so many coaches.
Um, Really, the main thing that I've learned is that if you think that you know everything about baseball, then you're a moron. And the guy that says I know everything is the guy that is ultimately going to fail. There's just every clinic I've gone to, everything that I've learned, every guy I've talked to, I'm learning something new. I'm picking something up. And those coaches who do that are the good ones, and they're the ones with the successful programs. Uh, I probably saw last year maybe 75 different speakers, either on video or live or whatever. And it's like every time I've like picked up something. I picked up something. And if you don't go to these things, you're missing out. And that's what I guess I realized from working as I do, collecting surveys and reporting on teams and stuff. Um, that the good coaches are the ones that are really seeking to make themselves better. And I remember talking to a coach one time. He goes, "You think knowing your career record is important?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "If you don't hate losing, then you're not motivated to try to make yourself better." I think we're playing in a competitive game, and somebody wins and somebody loses. And if we lost, it's like, what did I do wrong, and what do I have to get fixed? And I think guys who hate losing love winning, and don't be jerks about it. But I think those are the good coaches as well.
I appreciate that. Like, and you keep mentioning the book, and even in the years that I've been getting it, like, as you think about the evolution of that book, and maybe you touched on this stuff already, but is there anything else you want to talk about with the book, and how appreciative, obviously, you are, people doing their surveys, the time you put in, all the help you get, but just how has the book evolved from where it started to where it is now?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. We were so proud of the first one. I think it was 48 pages. We mailed out surveys. They had to mail them back. They wrote them in pen. Couldn't read the writing. Had them printed at a print shop in town, so we had to run them off on a laser printer. But the laser printer was 2 halls down from my classroom, so I had to put everything on a floppy disk and run literally and print it out. And I remember I got some photos, and we had a 3-pass scanner, so to scan one photo took like 3 minutes. And it's just like, looking back on that, it's like, okay, that's just is crazy. I mean, that was, horse and buggy metaphorically, and then people say, well, technology is so much better, so it probably doesn't take you as much time to do the book. And no, that's not true, because then I I love learning graphic design, and so I'll watch things and I thought this is a really cool technique and I want to implement it. I did this thing in the book this year where I always would take the tournament pairings and just pretty much run off with the WI had. Well, I had this idea it'd be really cool to put the team's graphics and logos and enrollments on that. And I had that idea like Wednesday, like 5 days before the book is due. And I thought that will be a really cool thing to do for next year. Well, then, like, it's 3 a.m. Before I know it, I'm halfway through D1. I'm like, okay, now I got to finish this. But I always, I've always tried to make it better than the year before. There's only one that I thought was took a step back, and that was 31. And I think just because 30 took such a huge jump, the 30th anniversary, and I really poured into that. And then I had pneumonia, and it was a bad year. So that's the only book I felt like that took a step backwards. But I think I try to make every book that I do not only the best one I've ever done, but the best one that in the country. And I don't know, there's no contest or anything like that. But like talking to these national speakers and stuff, if associations even do something like this, it's nowhere near what we're doing. And I'm like, good, because I want to win too. I want it to be the best.
Well, it's funny. I think about, from a coach perspective, there's like a couple days a year where it's like breaking news and you can't wait to get your eyes on it or your hands on it. One of those days is in early August when they come out with sectional pairings. It just gets posted and you want to see where you're at, who's in your sectional, you start scheming, whatever. And I feel like the next one is when you get your hands on the book. As soon as you check in at the association, get your hands on the book, you crack it open, and then you get to see the new things. Like, and you notice it right away as some of the new additions every year. I think also you get to the season, right? It's like, who made it out of sectional Tuesday, and then what are the seeds, and it's just it builds so much, and but just it's amazing as we get closer and closer to a high school season. College ball's already started. We're in this really cool window here that we're recording this on February 21st. But every year you make these strides with the book. So how do you keep coming up with new ideas? What does the future of the book look like?
Um, I really my goal is if it has anything to do with us, with high school baseball, college baseball, I want it in there. I want to celebrate coaches. I added that Hall of Fame section maybe 3-4 years ago because otherwise, where is that recorded? We have it on the website now, but before it was just a plaque, behind some bleachers in County Stadium. And I wanted that to be part of our permanent record. And I put all-star write-ups from the summer into the winter book because I want that to be part of the permanent record. So I'd really like it when somebody wants to know something, they can go into there and they can find it. I hunted for the WISA state tournament information for years, and my nephew found it down in UW in the State Historical Society. And so now I have 2 pages on the WISA records because I had guys emailing me all the time if I knew anything about it, and I didn't. But then we went and found it. And so if anybody has any ideas on something that could be added, I may not be able to do it because of the time commitment, but I'm always looking for something to make it better.
Well, and I think I know your easy answer here, so I'll just say it. Besides filling out your surveys when you ask us to, what else could we as coaches do to help you and your team with the book and make it an easier process? I know it's probably a badge of honor at times to put the hours that you do in, but man, it's got to take a toll on you. So, what can we as coaches, people who are listening, help you out? Preseason to get the book a more well-oiled machine.
First thing, take your all caps off. And we call that the Greg Featherston report because Feather is an all caps guy, and I every time I want to say, why are you shouting, man? So yeah, do that because we could do quite a bit of copying and pasting, like with names and stuff. But give us a lot, but don't give us too much. Some guys, it's like we get the entire history of their program. And so then it's work for us to get it down because it still has to fit. And this thing is like it's like a giant jigsaw puzzle, but the puzzle pieces are always moving and changing shapes. And so, like when I had a photo, and I that's the other thing too. Before I forget, we did not get a lot of photos submitted this year. We signed a deal with Gannett, and we bought a license from them. So any of their papers, I was able to find a lot of photos. Fox Valley, down through suburban Milwaukee, really, really had some really neat shots. But we don't have that Madison, La Crosse, Eau Claire, um, and if they don't send us a picture, then it's kind of boring. I like to have photos of kids. It's kind of part of it. And then I started doing that text wrap method I did a couple of years ago. Now I've been doing. I think that's been kind of cool. I try to make it look like it's highfalutin, as we say up here. But just yeah, anything I can do to make it look good. And then some guys will send me like pictures of three kids, and that's a pain in the rear end too, because it's like, okay, it's hard enough to fit one in. Now we got to try to squeeze these three in. But I'd rather have that than nothing. So I'm good with it if they really believe in it.
Absolutely. I'm just picturing you, combing through, Journal Sentinel in Milwaukee, or, like trying to find pictures of kids and who is this kid? He's on this team, he's on that team, and versus just, hey, submit a picture, kind of do what you're supposed to do. So,
Yeah,
um, the times in which I see you, right? So I see you, at the clinic, the book, all this stuff. And then the time I see you, is if we get a chance to go up to Appleton, or I get a chance to come and watch games or all state meeting. And, you get a front row seat at Appleton. And we get to see the culmination of so many things and so many different communities coming together. And man,
yeah.
I've said it before on this show, and talked to these coaches who win state championships. It's like I wish you could bottle that up and give it to people, because it's such an incredible experience. So when I bring up Fox City Stadium, when I bring up Appleton, what comes to mind?
What really comes to mind is I wish I could get there more often, because that's when I'm doing the program for the All Star Classic, and that is that I call that my sprint. So there's 72 kids that are picked, and they all get sponsors and ads and stuff like that. And I have to put together 96 pages in about 9 days, and that's really heavy on the graphic design and stuff like that too. So if the calendar falls the wrong way, I can't get down there because I don't have time. I'll miss my deadline, and you can't miss the deadline because that's part of how we raise money, not only for the classic but for the association too. So it's a must do. And then going to the All Star Classic is such a great experience. That's where I get to meet a lot of coaches that I only know through emails and stuff like that. There's three coaches picked, 12 total, that come down there, and then all these kids that I've been working on their pages and get to see them play, and they're just absolute studs. And I think what the really cool thing about us, and I know some people think there should be like a big school, small school, all state teams and all star, and I really disagree with that. When I was the head coach at Prairie Farm, I had a kid make the All Star Classic, and he competed. And if he was like in this, like football, they had like three kids were 8-man all state from one school. And like, so who cares? I mean, if you water it down so much, then it's not valuable. But like this kid, he went and he competed and he did very well down there. And he wasn't from a small school. He was one of the best players in the state. And so I think that's pretty cool about what we do with like the All Star and our All State teams. Um, a kid on the cover, the Shramick kid from Blair Taylor. He's the first kid ever on the cover from the Dairyland Conference. It's a little D4 school, kind of between La Crosse and Eau Claire. And everything I've heard about him is he's the real deal. Second team state All State last year. And if he was first team All State small school, I don't think that means as much as being second team All State when you've got Menominee Falls and Oak Creek and Sun Prairie East. All these big schools, kids that are on that same team with him. So I think that's something that I really hope that we never change, to be honest.
Well, and I'm glad you talked about the classic, because I think that's one of those things. It's the middle of summer. It's gorgeous, beautiful venue. Again, you got kids from all corners of the state, from all divisions coming there. And it's competitive. Obviously, people want to win, but it's also like relaxed enough that people can just take a breath. You're in Appleton, and everybody's all wound up, and It's the state championship and it's the semis and the quarters at D1 or whatever. Then obviously the finals on Thursday. But by the All-Star Classic, again, I tell you, my favorite thing is to watch those guys just take pregame, to watch pregame infield, outfield, watch them take ground balls, watch them throw the ball across the diamond, watch them play catch, and then obviously as they roll pitchers out, roll hitters out. I just love it. It's a phenomenal way just to end the season, close the book on literally or figuratively close the book on that particular season. So,
Yeah.
tell us more about what's the origin of the All Star Classic? How long has it been going on? Has it always been in that location? And then what's the future of it?
Well, I know Foles was one of the founding fathers of the All Star Classic, and I don't remember who was who were the other guys off the top of my head that started it, but I think the first one was in 1984, and they played it in County Stadium, and we've kind of looked at traveling around the state, and we've done it to some extent, but really it hasn't made any difference in the attendance of it. And I think the furthest a kid had to come last year was the Alberg kid from Solon Springs, which is, probably a fly ball from Superior. And then, the kids from Kenosha and then the Fox Valley obviously are there. But I think if you're if you're a head coach listening to this, be a member of the association. Otherwise, your kid's not eligible. And nominate your kid. If he makes the team, he's going to have a great experience that he's never going to forget. Talking to the kids that have made this, they all are just so extremely thankful that they got to participate in this. They knew it was going to be good, but they didn't have any idea how much fun it was going to be. And what's really fun is watching. There's four teams, say the West. The West goes from Superior all the way to like Rhinelander down to La Crosse. You take these 18 kids. You know how kids are. They come in, they're kind of quiet, kind of macho, and then by game three, it's like they've been teammates for 3 years of high school, and they're having a ball together, and a lot of them stay in touch with each other, and it's such a cool experience. And I know, like, just the West alone last year had 60 nominated, and then Fulls picks the West team, and Chad Montez the East, Eric Beard from Wrightstown picks the North, and Ronnie Kading still picks the South. Those guys have a tough job because they're trying to get not necessarily, and they do. They try to get the best baseball players, but they're also trying to get the best citizens. So these are kids that are playing in this that are good students, great leaders. When I'm looking at their biographies, they're all like these like supermen. They're the if they talk about kids being the future, okay, you want these guys involved. They played three sports. They were valedictorian. They were in the band. I mean, one kid was a concert pianist. And he was doing all these things. And the small town kids, they're the best at getting sponsors because the whole town's behind them. And so anybody that they even say hi to, they're like, yeah, here's some money for and then I get on those pages, I try to get everybody that they want in the program on their page because I think it's such a cool experience for every kid, but especially the small town kids that are been exceptional human beings and will continue to do so.
No, I love it. I was lucky enough to be one of the coaches selected in 2021, and and I had it's honestly one of my favorite experiences ever as a coach. I wasn't good enough as a player to make it, but to go there as a coach, many years later, to watch your kids from your own conference, who you're competing against, but you have so much respect for. Everybody
Yeah.
just lets their guard down a little bit, like you said. It's the awkward macho. They walk into the dorms, shoulders up. These guys are all 18 plus years old. They've had accomplished careers, maybe going to play college ball. All of a sudden, a Snapchat group starts. And these guys are, like you said, they're like best friends. They're hanging on each other. They're just being baseball guys. And
Yeah.
I know those guys stay connected. And it gives me goosebumps because I think that's what I want to give to kids. Not that it's my job to give it to the state, but if we can manufacture that as an association, I think the All-Star Classic is an incredible place for that to happen. And on the coaching side, just take the weekend if you can. Come up just for Friday or just for Saturday if you can. It's a beautiful park. They just do an incredible job.
Yeah, and we always have our golf outing on a Thursday morning before it. If you can get up to that, do it because it's baseball guys, and baseball guys playing bad golf is a lot of fun. And and then we're always looking for workers too. We need guys to run the ticket booth or run or not the concession stand. Oshkosh does that, but just to be around. And WBCA takes care of the room and stuff. And I really encourage young coaches, if you can, get involved with the association. Start calling guys on the board like myself, but certainly anybody on the board. We're all on baseballwisconsin.com. Do that and get involved, because that's going to make your experience as a coach so much more rewarding.
And there it is. Huge thank yous out to Joe for sitting down with us today. We had some tech issues. I think we ended up recording on a cell phone. So we did the best we could with the audio, but the content's most important. Speaking of content, Joe just sent an email out to all the head coaches about making sure you are a member of the association by May 1st. A lot of things at the end of the season that have to happen that are coaches' responsibilities. All-Star Game nominations, all-district, all-state. And if you're listening to the show, you're probably good to go. But just, look around the conference, look around your area, people especially new coaches. Just make sure they're doing right by their players. We'd never accuse guys of trying to, mess with the players' accolades. Sometimes coaches just don't know. So, anyways, great episode. Look forward to all the end-of-the-year things that the association has for us as well. Again, copies of the book are all across the state. Just really proud of the work that the executive board and all the years and the hours that Joe has put into it. He's just an absolute treasure in the state of Wisconsin. So, all right. Well, until the next episode, have a great rest of your day.